I did that. Next up, let's talk about Prebid 4.0. Our old buddy Patrick McCann is on the board of directors. Congratulations! What did you do to make that happen?
So I was elected by the Prebid publisher tier to be on the board and help publishers' interests be represented in all parts of the pre-board organization, to communicate publishers' interests directly to those developers and SSP partners.
Nice. So what is the Prebid directors meetings like? You know, is a lot of sparring with the tech companies? Like,
No, it's really friendly. It's been growing really fast. So we just welcomed Index Exchange and MediaMath as recent leader partners. So getting participation from the buy side has been really interesting. The membership's been growing really fast, and it's an exciting organization to be a part of.
Fantastic. And you have a presentation to share with us today about what's in Prebid 4.0. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff. You wrote a really cool little article for us, but you've got even more to share here. I'm going to jump out and let you do your thing.
Great. So thank you everyone for listening. Prebid 4.0 is a pretty big release in the sense that it adds a lot about trust. So in Prebid, trust in both our partners and then also trust in the software that is being compliant with various regulations, and that communication is happening in a standard way. And you don't need to do something custom for every partner that you have. 8 different ways for 8 partners can be a little bit frustrating. And it's also really frustrating to have to vet everyone's code, to go deep into it line by line to make sure it's not doing anything that you don't agree with. So in that sense, new module rules have been adopted recently, and they have a lot of nuance to them. But some of the main highlights are that you must disclose build or runtime imports. Runtime being something that the adapter would call client-side, another JavaScript library or endpoint, or build meaning that it would include some other library inside of its adapter. And those must now be locked to an open sourced version. They can't just be the latest version or whatever, so that every time that other thing changes, you have to put in a new pull request so the Prebid team can check it again for compliance with other rules and appropriate disclosures. And the imports that you're doing, like, they have to be relevant to the appropriate functionality. So ID modules should just be gathering identity, and bidders should just be bidding. And Prebid modules, they have to use the Prebid methods for device access, meaning that if you want to set a cookie or a local storage as a module, you have to do it through the Prebid core method so that Prebid core can regulate those things for compliance reasons. And in the past, a lot of these modules have not been kind of playing by the rules because the rules weren't set in stone, and Prebid was still nascent. And now that it's becoming a lot more mature and a lot more popular, some of these behaviors need to be tightened up. So also, the way that you communicate to your partners in Prebid is changing a little bit. So in the past, almost every single video bidder would read video parameters like what MIME types to accept, or different player settings or things like that through the bidder parameters, because there wasn't really a standard Prebid way to communicate that to bidders. And that's true for a lot of different communication that you want to do with a bidder. The 1 or 2 would support it, and then a bunch of them would, but maybe in different ways. And then now we formed a standard. So if you're reading a floor as a bidder, you should be reading it from the floors module. And if you're reading first-party data or contextual information that the publisher wants to transmit to you, it should be through the first-party data interface. And the S-chain and the referrer, and for example, whether or not you need to be COPA compliant inventory, things like that, they need to be read through standard ways rather than having to try to figure out how each bidder wants to hear that information. Also, that goes 2 ways. So you should be able to trust what your module partner is sending back to you, your bidder usually. So advertiser domain and other kind of metadata or meta bid fields are written to the bid response. Recommended now. A lot of these things will become required in the near future, potentially in Prebid 5.0. So this allows publishers a lot of options. So you could track discrepancies by advertiser domain, you could figure out which partners or what's the total spend of a particular advertiser aggregated across all your SSP partners. Or you could start to track down a low quality ad and block it really quickly. And maybe it's low quality because the video isn't rendering properly and you're not getting paid, or the ad's too heavy, or it's causing a redirect, or any of those things. So ad ops teams often want more information from the bid response and just making sure that it ends up at the publisher's hands rather than ending at the SSP is really helpful. Also, Prebid 4 is going to really help publishers make an effort to comply with appropriate privacy regulations. So if you have a TCF2 compliance CMP on your page and you install the enforcement module, then it will enforce purposes 1, 2, and 7 of the TCF2 purposes by default. And purpose 1 is device access, meaning that if you're enforcing that, no bidder will be able to set cookies or access local storage on the device via the pre-bid methods, and they're no longer allowed to have their own methods to do that. Serving basic ads is whether or not the auction may even occur. And then finally, there's analytics and measurement enforcement that you can potentially turn on with purpose 7 enforcement. Recently, we've added support for the additional consent string, which is Google's list of vendors that is in addition to the GPL. So you could potentially parse the additional consent string or pass it around. Finally, I just wanted to talk about a few new features that have come out that are changes in Prebid. The real-time data module type is a new type of module in addition to an analytics module or an identity module or a bidding module. What it does is it kind of supplies information in advance of the auction or gathers information in advance of the auction for the purpose of passing it to bidders or qualifying ad units for an auction. So applications of that might be contextual information that you want to pass to SSP partners. Also, information about the potential viewability of the ad or brand safety or any sort of thing that is happening pre-auction. Another thing is the floors module. So Prebid's now enabled the idea of a floor provider company. There's been many of them in the past that have tried to supply floors to AdX. Those companies now have the opportunity to build floors modules for Prebid or floors configurations for Prebid that the floors module will then supply and enforce, if you choose, with your SSP partners. And you have the opportunity to unite your AdX UPRs and with your Prebid UPRs as well, kind of set the same thing. And then finally, the Prebid Tools Committee is about to release, was working hard on something called the Professor Prebid, which is almost analogous to the Google console overlays, the Google Force console that you can use for QA. So the similar concept, but for Prebid, there'll be overlays on the ads. So you can figure out exactly what's serving. And well, that's all I got.
That's all you got, huh? That was a lot. I mean, this is just seems like it's a gigantic release. It's really crazy what you guys have all put together. And you know,
it's really been more like standardization of spec than code. So a lot of it's about the adoption of a rule, and then over the next weeks or months, there'll be code to comply with that rule coming into enforcement.
That's amazing stuff. Well, of course, you know, we'll keep up our conversations with you in the future and hope to have you write some more articles and tell us more about what's going on. And, you know, thank you for being a publisher advocate with all those tech guys.
My pleasure.
Okay. And with that, you know, we're going to take about 35-minute break before we get our breakout started in the afternoon.